Hello and welcome. I'm Marina Ridzic. It has become clear that this pandemic is not only a public health crisis, but also an economic, sociological, psychological one. Since the usual routine has been suspended until further notice, the loss of civil liberties, jobs, but also lifestyles become inevitable. What about inclusive leadership, human rights, and transatlantic cooperation in the post-corona world? Let's meet our speakers. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm pleased to have all of you. So, Elandre, what is your picture of the new normality in the post-corona world?
The new normal, if we look at this from the perspective of the United States, where I am, unfortunately, I think that the new normal, one, of course, will be drastically different than what we were used to, but may also sadly feel more of an extreme picture of what we had before in America in terms of the inequalities and the disparities. One, the impact of COVID-19 has really brought these to light. And I feel that any new normal, if we aren't taking drastic steps to correct for those issues, a new normal will actually be an exacerbation of the wealth gap. It will be an exacerbation of the differences between the haves and the have-nots. And we will see, because of the lack of social safety net in the States, the lack of worker protections, now that we have well over 30 million unemployed, now that we see that businesses are less likely to completely rebound once we do start to come out of the lockdown, if drastic steps are not taken, we will see a new normal, which looks like a worsened picture of what we had before. And I find that while that is disheartening to hear, I actually find that a reason for leaders across the country and both transatlantically to really come together and this moment to really declare what we are about and to make a stance and to take a stance to really declare that it is essential that we include all of these people who have suffered the most and have been suffering the most for generations, and to make a new normal out of actually creating protections for those groups and to make that the basis of a new social contract. So that is my hope for the new normal, but right now the picture is bleak, unfortunately.
So let's hear maybe different perspective from Paris, from Caroline. What is, let's say, potential long-term implications, Caroline, of the global pandemic on political and on business side?
On the business side, I think that, companies will have to rethink the way they process and especially the way they operate, maybe more at a local level. We saw that, for example, with the mask in France and how the industry is failing also at a European level. So I think the business, unfortunately, maybe the first step of businesses will be to lay off a lot of people because they will have to make sure that they survive. And usually the crisis management use the tools that you are very familiar with, but I'm hoping that the smart companies will quickly come to create new business models and new ways to empower also their employees. Not talking about the way people are going to work, maybe more obviously like from home and less work. So it's going to change also all the real estate markets that will also change the way people work. But I think businesses, will definitely have to rethink how they operate, how they work, the people they hire, and the competences. On a political level, for example, in France, I think it's also in Europe, it's a major topic that we have been addressing for a few, like maybe 3 or 4 years, really. It's about representativity and how people are more aware of that and that need. But in a way, also it's fracturing the voting system. And I think we're going to have to rethink radical, maybe democracies and how we're going to be able to embrace greater values. And I think it's going to be one of the main topic, for example, in France in 2022. Not even talking about the multilateralism, which I think is also in a big crisis, and international institutions that we're also losing faith. I think what happened with the OMS showed also a lack of confidence of citizens and population. So different dimensions and different shifts, probably.
Absolutely. And you touched really important questions regarding democracy and political side, but also how we will survive and where we could find new ways to make some money. So Anes from Italy is also with us. And after being in the lockdown for 2 months, Anes, do you believe that the biggest danger is not the virus itself?
So the situation reminded me of some parts of the book of Blindness from Saramago. And for sure, we are more frightening on going out and meeting other people. And I think that this is very important to take in consideration. And I believe that we have also to take in considerations the cause and the effects that this COVID-19 will bring to this society, changing the mentality, changing how we perceive others, but also like, you know, on economical aspect, we have to change all the businesses, as Carolina said from Paris. So now we are facing these challenges all together in Italy, and we're trying as much as we can to overcome them. One of the challenges that we have to face is also mental health. I think that this has to be taken in consideration. So I've been part to many hackathons in the past 2 months. One of them was organized by the European Commission. And on this hackathon, we were talking also about not only the rule of law, that is very, very important, but also the mental health. So the mental aspect of the human being that are living now in this situation. So I believe that we have to take in consideration also this part, and we have to face it.
Absolutely. Mental health and access to justice is such important topics for all of us. So Zeynep, what are the potential long-term implications of the global pandemic on refugees, on minorities, on human rights?
Well, we see that the world is changing. I mean, it's a pandemic, it's a pandemic. COVID-19 really affected the way that we are living, as well in Belgium. And it affected simple things like going for grocery shopping, going to see your family, visiting your friends. And what I believe at this moment is that minority rights, it's not even on the agenda. Because we are dealing with a huge pandemic. And because everybody is now more focused on staying healthy, people are more afraid. So we are always focused on the danger part, which will make, I believe, it more difficult to interconnect as well with people with different backgrounds. You're more closed. What I also think is very symbolic, in Belgium, the federal government applied a measure which is called the silo system. So you're only allowed to see 4 people. And those 4 people always have to stay in the same group, so they cannot create other contamination. I think that's already very symbolic to see how we are isolating people for the moment. And I agree with Eliandre, because he said that, and I believe it is the same thing in Belgium, that dynamics that are already existing, like discrimination again for people with migration background, concerning religion, they will only be reinforced by this pandemic. That's what I believe. And yeah, if you look at the USA, for example, people with a black skin, they are afraid to wear a mask because they look like they think that they are from a gang. That's already very frightening. So you see that this pandemic will reinforce the already existing problems of our world.
Yeah, we talked last time a lot about xenophobia, about racism, and you mentioned that many countries now they are just focusing on themselves, or majority try to take more power. So Yasmin, we are heading to you. I know that many campaigns used a quote, think globally, act locally. So are you able to provide us with some concrete good examples of that approach during this pandemic? And from your perspective, what life might be like after this crisis passes?
Well, it's a difficult question, and I don't think we can cover it in 3 minutes, but I think we will have to reconsider our position as consumers, right? So everybody's talking about the consequences of the pandemics, but not everybody talks about how we need to get out our wallets and go out and buy some new books, visit theaters as soon as they open up, and restaurants, because there are many, many people that depend on our money. It's not about how much we saved or whether we lost a job. It's about whether we will be able to reboot the economy in a way that we are, accustomed as consumers or not, or we will have to readjust and become new disruptive sort of agents in the field and so on and so forth. In the countries like Bosnia, it's very difficult to predict what's going to happen because, for instance, we have many citizens who left the country before the pandemics to seek new jobs in Germany and France and other countries. And now, due to the pandemics, they came back home. So the unemployment is just staggering. It's skyrocketing here. So I'm not really sure whether people will think about themselves as consumers, which they shouldn't primarily do so because this is not the purpose of our day-to-day living. But there is one aspect that we're keeping, on the side, we're overlooking in this respect. So I think also that going back to the normal, providing local campaigns to going back to the normal life as we know it, will have to certainly encompass this economic sort of responsibility that everybody has, because not everybody is well off. The country, after the pandemics, the country will have to definitely look for new means to redistribute the pressure, provide some loans, provide some different measures that will help to reboot the economy. But it's not only the state's responsibility to do so. Everybody has to be part of it. Everybody has to be fiscally responsible, and I believe that it is everybody's duty to step up and try to do their best to recuperate the economy that we had before the pandemics kicked in.
I agree, absolutely. Solidarity could be like a key word to find a best recipe for our new normal or best future after this pandemic. So global health struggles, Jovana, go hand in hand with global recession. What do you think? Who is the weakest part of the society in the post-corona world, globally speaking?
Well, obviously, the coronavirus pandemic and the health crisis caught the world off guard, and even the countries with advanced healthcare systems are heavily impacted. For example, Italy has one of the most advanced healthcare systems, but has suffered tremendously at the time of the pandemic. And at this stage, I mean, the conclusion can be made that that is that decentralized healthcare systems have shown advantages in comparison, for example, to the systems like in the United States. So, but globally speaking, the weakest parts of the society are indeed the unemployed, poor, and the minorities. And these groups have been neglected generally by the central government institutions or the majority communities. These groups are facing difficulties with access to services, including healthcare. So even strong Western democracies have faced problems and shortages when it comes to the minorities. And the problem, of course, becomes more serious with the developing countries, especially authoritarian regimes. And for example, I'll give an example like on a local level in the case of Kosovo, which has, for example, the two official languages by its constitution. The Serbian-speaking ethnic minorities do not have equal access to information because this law on official languages is not being respected. And it's, with the lack of access to information, especially to the information related to health, and the government imposed regulations or the time of the or the pandemic or the packages for the unemployed, for example, they are not receiving this information in a timely manner, or they are not receiving it at all, or they're receiving inaccurate information. So I would say, for example, that this is a cross-cutting issue for all of the countries today, that the unemployed populations, poor, and the minorities and different types of minorities are actually being the most affected.
So we are heading again to hear more from Elandre. You tackle these issues, but now maybe you can explore a little bit deeper. So what are the potential implications of this global pandemic with special focus on political side and upcoming elections in the US? Because we should admit that somehow President Donald Trump has been star of this pandemic, using his influence and some kind of even medical advice to find best way to provide Americans with irrelevant information, and from time to time to actually do his campaign. Am I right?
Sadly, I think that we're seeing an interesting repetition of 2016 just in the role that misinformation is playing. And in my opinion, I feel that that is actually going to be one of our biggest hurdles. So on one hand, we have the role that misinformation is playing, which Donald Trump and a number of people in his administration are heavily contributing to, just in terms of the nature of the virus, the need to stay at home, the placing greater value on the economy than on the lives of our most vulnerable citizens who are already dying in the tens of thousands and will continue to do so over the next couple of months until we actually have a solution for this. So we have the misinformation that is greatly contributing to how citizens across the United States are actually responding day to day, and the precautions that they're taking is we're seeing a rise in people actively protesting while disregarding the guidelines for social distancing. In the name of the economy, you have people who are actively throwing COVID parties and the misguided attempts to gain immunity by contracting it from a positive person. So if that has a risk of playing into the elections in terms of who is seen as the most credible leader. So there is the very real fear that we may end up with another 4 years of incompetent leadership at the executive level at this country. Secondly, beyond misinformation, we also just have what are we logistically going to do in this country in order to vote? As we have seen most recently in California, they have already made it official that every citizen can vote by mail and will be receiving a mail-in ballot. Will those measures be taking place across all 50 states to ensure that all Americans can vote safely in the upcoming November election? Will that be a priority? So, and if that is not the case, what measures will be taken in place in person so that citizens can feel safe to exercise their democratic right to vote? So just as in 2016, we had a number of issues throughout the country and voter suppression as the guidelines for the Civil Rights Act have loosened and states are no longer overlooked and overseen in the same ways by the federal government. We are also seeing that backsliding now. And the biggest worry is the ways in which the coronavirus could also exacerbate that process of disenfranchisement. So that is another thing that we must be vigilant about and counter actively in order to have a successful and trustworthy election here in the States in November.
I remember during 2016, actually after campaign, we talk a lot about privacy, about data from social media. And as a human rights activist, Yasmin, where is the balance between our privacy, our human rights, and official protection and control of ourselves? Because now we are facing with a choice between surveillance and citizen empowerment.
Well, it's a difficult question again, but I think we have different conceptualization about what this means. That the line is very thin, I would say, because if you take a look at for instance, in China, where you have a what is it called, social crediting system, right? The Honest Shanghai and all the sub projects. You would, if you ask any Chinese person, I guess in China, about their opinion on the credit system, they would tell you, well, citizenship for us means something else than in the liberal West, because in exchange for protection from the and social support, citizens have to provide support to the state as well. So it's a different consumerism sort of perspective onto this. I'm not advocating for social credit system or anything. I'm just saying that there are different conceptions of what the state is providing to you, and what do you as a citizen are intended to provide to the state, right? So if you reposition your philosophy about it, obviously everybody from their own side will say, well, I'm so against surveillance because I want my privacy. My privacy is enshrined in the Constitution, and I'm, super individual in my rights, and I need to be protected as much as possible. And then again, you go home and you click on your whatever Facebook and your social media, and then when they ask you whatever, do you transcribe the rights to the Facebook or whatever, and you're like, okay, next, and then all the data that you're providing to the providers of social networks that you're using are completely transferred to them because you want to use some service that they provide to you. Well, it's the same logic with the state. If you want the state to be very competent in providing you rights and protections from everything that might possibly happen to you, there is a limit to your personal individual rights in which you are transferring to the state. The fact is, and the difference between the two is that with the social media, we're automatically granting this and accepting the terms because we want to use the service. And on the other hand, we're considering state as something inherent and something that provides us services without realizing our duties as citizens to also transfer some of our trust onto the people that are entrusted to provide us with security that we deserve. So on a debate between the two, there is no black or white sort of answer. There are 50 shades of gray, and I think we're going to have to move towards a society which carefully not only talks about individual rights and surveillance, but also the transfer of rights and how the surveillance will be possible if such thing is necessary and if we all agree is necessary for us.
Okay, from transfer of rights, we are going to move to transfer of soft skills. And let me ask Caroline, can we all now agree that during this crisis, CEOs, leaders, managers realize the importance of soft skills such as emotional intelligence, flexibility, empathy? I would say it's really important to now realize that we are working from our homes, and somehow we are trying to do our best. From time to time, these skills could be key drivers of effectiveness and excellence across teams.
Yeah, I think it's sad to wait these kind of events to just realize that these skills are very important for a company and for a business to grow. Unfortunately, I'm not sure everyone got this. I think you have, depending on the size of the company also, I think big companies right now are more focused on how they're going to save jobs, then they're going to save the industry, and they're going to save money, and how the prospects of their clients are going to work. I think flexible small companies, startups, which are the people that I'm more working with, we're already aware of that importance, and I think they're just being confirmed that this is the kind of skills that they're looking for. They're looking for people that are responsible, that are empowered, that take initiatives, that have the ability to adapt also their competences and their expertise. And like you were saying, like commuting is going to be the next step towards new ways of working. And for that, you need people that have this capacity. So I think it will become in the next probably few months, 10 months, a year, 15 months, it's going to become a new way to hire people. Right now, I don't think like big companies got that fully yet, the full picture.
So Zeynep, do you believe that future of education would be completely virtual and online?
So I think distance learning should never become an alternative for physical learning, for physical school. And the reason is that for these children with a socioeconomic difficult profile, they don't have internet access. And this is the case in Brussels, where 1 of 3 children is living in a poor health condition. So they don't have access to internet. They don't have their own rooms. They don't have a computer. Those things may seem very normal for a lot of people, but it's not the case for 1 of 3 children in Brussels. So that's why I think it should never become an alternative for the physical school. And the other reason is that what we see now in Belgium is that some teachers cannot reach for their students anymore. So we see that every teacher has 2 or 3 pupils who are not present on the online platforms, who do not join the school courses online. And when they try to reach them by calling them or going to their houses, they cannot find them. So that became a really big problem because they are completely lost under the radar. Those were children who were doing well at school, but since that network left, they are totally lost. And we are trying to, or the Belgian government is trying to work very, very closely with the local communities so they can, they have the most contact with of course, the parents who are living in their communities to reach out for them. But what I also believe is important that we should, in a way, also empower the parents to use these digital platforms, to use a computer so they know this. And at the same time, we should provide laptops for children. They should have all the possible means to be able to have the right for education. And of course, third, what is important is the connection with the school, not necessarily learning new material, learning new things at school, but just being connected with the school environment so they do not get, they do not lose that familiarity with the school system.
I believe the situation is even worse in the part of the world where Jovana is coming from. And Jovana, living in Kosovo, we can touch this topic, education as well. But Kosovo has been qualified as a conflict zone since the 19th. So could you now witness solidarity, mutual understanding between two usually conflicting sides? Or during this pandemic, situation escalated?
Well, yes, indeed. Kosovo and Serbia exist in an ongoing animosity for over 20 years now after the conflict. And what is currently happening is the dialogue is in a deadlock. There are many issues unresolved, especially the issue related to the status of Kosovo and recognition of Kosovo. And it's very much reflecting on different spheres of the entire society here. Most impacted are, of course, the non-majority communities, ethnic minorities, primarily Kosovo Serb, but also others, Serbian-speaking minorities and other like Roma. So positive, but yeah, on the positive side, the positive trend can be noticed. And Kosovo is a bit complex and I really don't want to go into the details of it because it will take me forever, but we do have here two parallel healthcare systems. One that is Serbia and one that is Kosovo. And this is complicating things a lot. And in these areas specifically, we have seen some positive steps that have actually happened between the two sides. So for example, we could see the cases of where Kosovo allowed, for example, from the doctors from Serbia to come and cross the closed borders and help in this parallel Serbian hospitals. Also, what is something that we consider to be kind of a historic moment here and that happened, we had a joint press conference of the two mayors of this divided city of Mitrovica, and who jointly called for cooperation in respect to the regulations that are imposed in the funding of the pandemic. Also, Serbia even sent tests to Kosovo, which was also an important development. This sort of cooperation or communication was really non-existent before when it comes to the governments communicating in such a way. And overall, the official Belgrade and Pristina did show maturity and solidarity in these difficult times, but indeed, this is not much. On the other hand, it is indeed an important step in improving the relations. Unfortunately, both Serbia and Kosovo are in the middle of their internal turmoils. Kosovo's government fell, Serbia is preparing for the new elections, and it's a complete mess out here. So all of this positive news that you can say of the cooperation and solidarity are very much put aside in the background of this kind of like more important scandalous news. And it's really to be seen what will the discourse be after the crisis and when the pandemic is over.
Okay, and for the end, very briefly, that's my actually follow-up question for Anas. What will future historians say about this moment? And we heard a lot of struggles and challenges, but also really good stories from this solidarity perspective and inclusiveness. So Anas, could this pandemic be qualified as a turning point in the history of the 21st century regarding liberty, democracy, mutual understanding?
Well, I believe that this is a turning point in the history of 21st century. So I hope that our kids will learn from this situation. And this is for sure an opportunity that we have to take to change the way we perceive society toward a more inclusive, technological, and green society. So inclusive in a way that we have to rate people not voting. So the rate of people that are not voting or that are not being part or are part of minority and not taking part of the society are increasing and increasing. So I mean, this is a very turning point on this way. So we have to take this opportunity to change toward a more inclusive society. From technological aspects, we have to, for sure, take in consideration privacy problem, rule of law, and trying to understand how to cope with technology, helping to find a bridge between technological devices and the future of our democracies.
Okay, thank you so much for this discussion. And I consider all of you as big thinkers, as Anne said. So I hope we will find together best ways to manage many issues and obstacles in the future. So thank you one more time, and
Thank you.
See you soon in person, very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.